All right, today we're diving into something huge. We're talking about the most valuable real estate you've probably never even heard of. A $1 trillion land grab is happening as we speak, not on Earth, but in the digital world. And it all boils down to one simple word: block space. So let's get into it.
Yeah. So who really owns this stuff? Who owns this new digital frontier? It's a question that sounds simple, but believe me, the answer is anything but. And it's a super important question because it's at the very heart of this massive land grab. We're not talking about physical land, dirt and rock. We're talking about digital territory. We're talking about block space.
Okay, so what even is block space? Let's break it down. In the simplest terms, it's just the finite, limited capacity a blockchain has to process transactions in any given block. The key word there is finite. Think of it like this. It's the digital land. It's the foundation where the entire decentralized internet is being built. We're talking everything from smart contracts to all those NFTs.
And this is where things get really tricky. The whole reason ownership is so hard to pin down is because, well, you can look at block space in a bunch of different ways. Is it a commodity, kind of like digital oil that you have to burn to make the network go? Or is it more like digital real estate, a plot of land you build your app on? Or maybe it's a public utility, like bandwidth, something that should just be open and accessible to everyone. It's this confusion, this ambiguity, that makes the whole question of who owns it so fascinating and, frankly, so contentious.
All right, so that brings us to our first big topic here, this $1 trillion land grab. At first glance, the answer seems almost obvious. You'd think the person who actually builds the block, the miner, or these days the validator, they must be the owner, right? I mean, it makes sense. They're the ones putting up the cash, the hardware, all the resources, and for a long time, yeah, that's pretty much how everyone thought about it. But then something happened, a really big shift, a kind of quiet revolution that completely turned the tables. The simple role of the block producer got shattered into a bunch of different pieces, and suddenly you had this whole new cast of characters, all fighting for a piece of the pie. And that leads us to a totally new way to frame this whole thing. We're not just talking about miners anymore. Now it's a world of landlords, tenants, and architects.
So this whole shakeup happened because of a technical change called proposer-builder separation, PBS for short. And honestly, it's a total game changer. What it does is it splits the job of making a block into two separate roles. It separates the authority to propose a block from the actual work of building it. The newspaper analogy is perfect. The owner of the paper has the right to publish, but they hire an editor to actually pick the stories and lay them out. The owner has the authority, sure, but it's the editor who decides what you actually read.
Okay, so here's how this new specialized supply chain actually works. First, you've got the proposer. That's our original validator. They basically just auction off their right to make the next block to the highest bidder. Then you have the builder. These are specialists, and their whole job is to construct the most profitable block possible to win that auction. And finally, you have a relay, which is basically a trusted escrow service, a middleman that makes sure the proposer and the builder can trust each other without having to, actually trust each other. And that's the key takeaway here. This is the new reality. The validators, the people with millions of dollars of capital at stake, they've effectively become passive, rent-seeking landlords. They're just leasing out their digital property for 12 seconds at a time to whoever pays the most, and they have basically zero say over what actually gets built on that land.
So if you look at this new hierarchy, it's pretty clear the real power has moved. The builder, they now have the strongest claim to ownership because they're the ones making the critical decisions, which transactions get in, and just as importantly, in what order. They are quite literally the architects of the blockchain's history, block by block.
So, okay, why does any of this matter to you? Well, here's the kicker. The builder market is becoming incredibly centralized. We're talking about just a handful of very powerful players now controlling what goes into the majority of Ethereum blocks. And that means they have the power to censor transactions they don't like or reorder things for their own profit. That is a massive concentration of power in a system that was built on the promise of decentralization. It's a really big deal.
But hold on, the builders aren't the only ones grabbing for power here. There's another major player in this game. The Ethereum protocol itself has, as the kids say, entered the chat, and it's making its own very powerful claim to ownership.
This happened with a really famous upgrade called EIP 1559. Here's how it changed things. Before, every penny of the transaction fees went straight to the block producer. Simple. But after 1559, the main chunk of that fee, the base fee, gets burned, poof, gone forever, completely destroyed. The producer now only gets a much smaller, optional tip from the user.
And this is a huge economic shift. By burning that base fee, the protocol is essentially performing a stock buyback for its own currency. It takes the revenue that comes from selling block space and distributes that value to all ETH holders by making every single token a little bit more scarce. So what does that do? It rips economic ownership away from the producers and gives it to the collective of token holders. The protocol, as an entity, becomes the primary economic beneficiary.
But wait, there's more. The story doesn't stop at the base layer. It gets even more complicated and, honestly, more interesting when we start looking at layer 2s. You can think of these as a kind of franchise model for Blockspace.
See, on most of these Layer 2 networks, there's a single, very powerful entity called a sequencer. And this sequencer has absolute, total control over the order of transactions on its network. It's a lot like a franchisee. They pay a fee, rent really, to the main Ethereum chain for security. And in return, they get to run their own shop, selling their own premium high-speed block space to their own set of users.
And this setup leads to a few different flavors of ownership on Layer 2. The most common one is the centralized sequencer, where the company that built the rollup is the clear, undisputed owner. But people are experimenting. You've got newer ideas like shared sequencers, which try to decentralize that power by creating a committee of owners. And then you have this really interesting concept of base rollups, which basically say, you know what, let's just give all the power and ownership back to the main Ethereum validators, based on the idea that the Layer 1 protocol should be the ultimate owner of it all.
So, after all that, who's the king? Who actually owns Blockspace? Well, the big reveal is, there is no single king. The throne is empty. Instead, ownership is completely fragmented. It's split between a whole collection of different groups, and all of them have a pretty legitimate claim.
We can really break it down into 4 different types of ownership. First, you've got your economic owners. That's the protocol itself and all the token holders who get the value from that fee burn. Then you have the operational owners, the builders and the L2 sequencers. These are the folks who control the day-to-day, moment-to-moment operations. Third, and this is crucial, you have the sovereign owners. That's the users and the people running nodes. They hold the ultimate power because they can just choose to reject the chain if they don't like the rules. And finally, you can't forget the emerging legal owner, the state. Governments are waking up and increasingly asserting their right to regulate all the actors in this space.
So you see, it turns out we might have been asking the wrong question from the very beginning. Blockspace isn't some simple commodity you can just own, like a house or a car. It's so much more than that. It's a living, breathing political economy. It's a digital nation where power and control, the very right to write history, is constantly up for grabs, fought over every 12 seconds, block after block.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In this wild new digital frontier, is ownership a right you can hold on to, or is it a power that has to be won over and over again?